Hello again. For this video, we're going to show how you would do factoring using the Magic X method. Now, this is just another method of factoring quadratics. This will work just as well as your other methods, such as your factor by grouping. However, if the problem is not factorable, in other words, it's prime, it will not work just like any other method. And if your leading coefficient happens to be negative, you should probably factor it out first, as the Magic X has some problems working with that as well. So the first thing we're going to do is draw our X. We still have to identify our A, our B, and our C values. And up here in the top of this X, we're going to show what the A times the C calculation is. So A times C, 3 times 4 is going to give us 12. And then in the bottom section here, we're just going to list what the B value is, which happens to be an 8. And just like before, we still got to find the factors of positive 12 that make 8 when you add them together. Now, this being a positive tells us that the two factors we're going to put here are the same sign, which means they're either both positive or they're both negative. Now, since I'm adding up to a positive value, they have to both be positive. So the next thing I need to do then is list the factors of 12. We got 12 in 1, we got 6, we got 2, we got 4, we got 3. And which of these factors add up to 8? Clearly it's these two here. So I'm going to put a 6 here and a 2 here and put the two factors. And it doesn't matter which side I put which one, as long as they're here and not up here and here. The next thing we're going to do is go back and take our leading coefficient, which is our A, and put it underneath each of those factors. So we got a 6 over 3 and we got a 2 over 3. Now we're almost done with our factor form. We're just going to simplify this a little bit. So we're going to call this 2 over 1, and you should leave the 1 there. This is already simplified. Now to make this in factor form, we're just going to take the bottom number, which is 1, times by the n. So we get 1n. And we have a positive 2 or a plus 2 in the numerator. So there's one of our factors, 1n plus 2. Come back over here, do the same thing. Take the bottom number, which is a 3, times it by n. So we have 3n. So 3n. That's a positive 2, so plus 2. And this becomes our factored form. Now, if either one of these numbers in the numerator here or here happen to be a negative, we would, of course, just put a minus sign in here. But this is the fully factored form. We could check to see by doing 3 times 1, getting 3 here, 2 times 2, giving us 4 there. And the middle term comes from the outer and inner calculation. So I have a 6 here and a 2 here. When I add them together, I still get 8n. Okay, here's another example. Draw our X, identify A, B, and C. Up here we're still going to do A times C, so 8 times negative 10 is negative 80. And down here we're going to put our B, so that's negative 5. So I'm looking for the factors of negative 80 that will add up to a negative 5. Now, since I have a negative here, that tells me that my two factors that go in here and here have opposite signs. In other words, one of them is positive and the other one is negative. But this says that the bigger factor has to be negative, because when I add them together, I still had more negatives. So I want to list the factors of negative 80. So negative 80. The first factors that come into mind would be an 8 and a negative 10. And the reason I put the negative on this one is because, remember, my bigger factor has to be negative, so my sum comes out to a negative. Well, the difference between these two is only negative 2. I need a negative 5, so they're too close together. I got to separate them. So let's go down. Let's try a 5, and the 5 times would be a negative 16. That still gives me 80. But the difference between these is negative 11, and I want a negative 5. So this one, they were too close. These two, they're too far apart. Neither one of them hits negative 5. So the question is, are there any numbers between 8 and 5 that are also factors of 80? Well, 7 doesn't go in this, and 6 doesn't go in this because 2 and 3 don't go in at the same time. So there are no factors of negative 80 that will add up to negative 5. Now, since there are no factors that will make that, we call this right here a prime number, and it cannot be factored. So not factorable.